One, I can still hear you, Molly. Okay.
Where's my face?
I don't see your face, but I hear you. Just know that.
All right. You know,
Hey, everybody. We are, what a perfect night to have Mary Keswani on here. Let me just start with that. And because we're playing with technology right now, so if you'll bear with us for just a second, and we're gonna get Molly on here with us as well, and then we're gonna introduce Mary Keswani, and then talk a little bit about technology. That will be amazing. Okay, hang tight, you guys. Give me just a second.
Jess, I'm gonna pop out and pop back in.
That's perfect. We'll see you in just a minute. Yes.
All right.
All right. Well, while we're waiting for Molly, I want to go ahead and introduce Mary Keswani. Mary Keswani is here with us in Louisville, Kentucky. And I'm going to let you introduce yourself. Tell us a little about yourself and what you do.
Perfect. Thank you for having me tonight. I really appreciate it. And I'm seeing people pop in on the chat saying hello. So hello, everybody. This is fun. This is what a great idea. I'm a professional astrologer. I've been reading charts professionally since 1988 and began studying astrology years before that. Astrology is a symbolic language. Oh, she's back. She's reappeared.
She's back.
Okay, Jess, I hear you.
Okay. So
can you hear me?
She cannot. So, and it looks like, are you frozen, Molly?
Nope.
Okay. You just can't hear Mary, correct?
Let's try that one more time.
Okay.
I was going to introduce myself.
Okay, so I'm going to keep introducing herself, and then you and I will chat back and forth. We'll make it amusing. We always do. So, Mary, I'm going to let you continue, please.
Not a problem. Astrology is my passion. And if you've been to see me as for an astrological reading, if you have attended one of my classes, one of the things that I will say is that astrology is a symbolic language. In fact, there was a famous astrologer, Dane Ridjar, who said that astrology is a language. And if you understand this language, then the sky speaks to you. And so my job is to interpret what the patterns are around us and make it make sense to people in their everyday lives. That's kind of what I do in a nutshell.
And it's really fascinating because I've been to see Mary Keswani for a reading, and it's so detailed, and it's I have not spent the time really learning the charts. So when I stare at a natal chart, it's got all these lines, and it's so fascinating to look at it and see so much detailed information in one chart. It's so. How long did it take you to learn that? And I'm going to see if Molly's going to pop back in here too.
I did not even attempt to read charts except for practice for the first 4 or 5 years of just dedicated study. And I've never stopped studying. This will be I will study forever because there's always something new. Your chart is like a portal. It's literally not just your blueprint, but you can use it like an oracle. You can go into it backwards in time to understand what patterns brought you here, your ancestral patterns, your karma, if you will. And you can also move forward in time so you can get a glimpse into what is ahead of you. If you know yourself, the idea with astrology is that if you understand the season in which you're born, the gifts that you've been given, you can make the best use of them. It does not restrict you in any way. It empowers you.
I would agree with that completely. And I want to welcome Molly. Molly can hear us both.
Hello.
Hi, Molly.
Yes. I'm going to jump in on this because we were just playing with technology, and just before we popped on, I was like, Mary, how close are we to Mercury being in retrograde? Because we so often, like, it's one of those like that and the full moon that people are like, oh my God, right? So, and yesterday for me, T-Mobile was not friendly, and it went down at a certain point, and I could not call, and I got a load of texts at midnight. So if you didn't hear from me yesterday, I got your text at midnight. And so I asked Mary, well, how close are we? Can you kind of talk about Mercury retrograde. Shadow of it? Yeah, that would be great.
For those of you who know Mercury retrograde, and I will explain what that means, Mercury will go retrograde this Thursday, just about 1 o'clock in the morning, and will remain retrograde from until July the 12th. Mercury is the planet that is closest to the sun. It's associated with communication, information, transportation. Think how quickly our minds move, how fast we can take in information. So imagine the universe had this really brilliant idea that 3 times a year for about 3 weeks, we have to slow down. We have an opportunity to, like the ocean kind of waves in and out, we've got the opportunity to back up for 3 weeks, find our mistakes, change our minds, figure out what it is that we want to do before we move forward. So from an astrological perspective, the planet Mercury is going to, traverse one section of the zodiac. In this case, this month, for those of you who know astrology, between the 14th degree of Cancer and the 5th degree of Cancer. So first, it moves from 5 degrees to 14 degrees. It's going to pause on Thursday, back up and go all the way back to 5 degrees, turn on July the 12th, and return to 14 degrees. So that area of your chart is getting a hit. It is saying, pay attention to what's going on here. When Mercury is retrograde, people think of Murphy's Law gone crazy. People lose their keys, their phone stops working, emails go to cyberspace somewhere. Just really bizarre things tend to happen. If you're a business owner, you'll have people that will call and change their appointment or forget their appointment. So always double check the details. Use this time to remind people that they've established a connection with you. Saying, don't forget to be here at 11 o'clock on this day. Remind them of your phone number. Make sure you've got all the digits correct, because mistakes happen. It's never the end of the world, but it's incredibly frustrating. So my advice to my clients and to anyone listening, during Mercury retrograde for the next 3 weeks, a really great time to do anything that has the RE prefix in it. Research, rearrange, repair, reapply, renew, and relax. Did that help?
Yes, yeah. I love those R's. Yes.
I do too.
Well, Molly, I'll let you chip in here. I'm glad we got you on here.
Yeah, me too. There's so many questions that I have. I mean, I know we're getting ready to go into Mercury retrograde. We've got a solar eclipse that's coming up this weekend, and we've got an additional 4 or 5 planets that are currently in retrograde. Obviously, there's a lot of really intense energy happening right now. What kind of insight can you give us into what's happening with the planets and the stars and how that's affecting us here?
There is a tremendous amount that's happening. This is a very, very busy astrological time. That's what I can say. So just the period that we're in right now, the planet Venus is retrograde. She's going to finally turn direct on the 25th. But Venus retrograde, she's been retrograde since May the 13th. When Venus is retrograde, she will give you an opportunity to reevaluate relationships. Take a look at your finances, anything that is Venus ruled. Maybe there are things that you don't want anymore in your life. They're no longer valuable to you. That could be things, that could be relationships, it could be clothes, it could be anything. But look at what is important and take a look at your self-esteem. Venus was last retrograde in almost the exact same spot she is this year 8 years ago. So look back to what was going on in May and June of 2012, and I guarantee you there's going to be a connection, because the retrogrades will always pull something from our past if we're not finished with it and give us that opportunity to do it again. Venus retrograde, many people find themselves contacted by people from their past, or you feel the sudden need to say, I think I'll reach out and find that person on Facebook, or send them an email, or they'll show up in your dreams. It may not even be that you see them, actually, but they will pop in your consciousness. So it's kind of checking in some way. This weekend on the 20th, as we move into Saturday, we have the summer solstice. So it's like here in the Northern Hemisphere, the longest day of the year. This is when, if you watch the sun, I'm a sun watcher. I love going out and looking at the sky, watch the sun, the moon, the stars. But the sun literally will move through the year. It creates almost a sine wave pattern, almost kind of an S shape if you plot it. But what we see from our perspective here, especially in Kentucky, is we're going to always see the sun sort of just to the south of us. But this time of year, it gets really high in the sky. It's as far to the north in its travels as it's going to be, and our days are really long. So you spend these summer days, it's warmer, we can spend time outside, the fireflies are out. This time of year, supposedly, the nature spirits and the fairies are very, very active this time of year. With the summer solstice, it's like a portal that opens. It's one of the 4 turning points of the year that really imbue us with solar energy. So it gives us a chance to kind of get a boost to our personal energy, our consciousness, our crops to take off growing. Within 9 hours of this particular solstice, we have a solar eclipse. So that will be on Father's Day. That will be very, very early Sunday morning. So we won't see it here. It'll be visible in Central Africa and Saudi Arabia, northern India, and through parts of the Far East. But a solar eclipse at that 0 degrees of Cancer, because that's what summer is, the sun will enter the zodiacal sign of Cancer. So, excuse me, an eclipse at that degree is considered to activate a world point. So it means that whatever is happening right now is being magnified. There's just a lot going on this year, and this is just starting to accelerate the energy of it.
Wow. So you're saying that this eclipse is actually going to take what's already present for us now and actually magnify it to a greater degree? Oh, yes. Yay. I will be in my basement on Saturday.
About that. I saw Molly earlier, and we were just saying, we were just talking about the intensity of things. So that's where my mind went when you said that too. I was like, oh no.
Just got a bunker.
It's not all bad, but this year, the very start of 2020, we were also excited, new numbers to work with here. Mm-hmm. We're out of the teens and into the 20s. In January, 2 of these slower moving planets, Pluto and Saturn, joined together at the same degree of Capricorn on January the 12th. What that did was it began a new cycle that had to do with the nature of those 2 planets. Again, astrology is a symbolic language. So my job is to break that down and figure out, well, what happens when these 2 planets get together? It's going to happen every about 35 to 38 years. But the last time they were together in Capricorn, conjunct in Capricorn, was in 1518. So it's been a long time.
Yeah.
These 2 planets, when they join together in Capricorn, Saturn wants to hold on to things. It wants to crystallize it. It wants to keep control. Pluto wants to blow it up. It says, we're finished with it, get rid of it, and move on. And so you've got this battle where sometimes it will turn violent. If there is something that has been held down for too long, it's been simmering, and it will blow. And people will respond by wanting to push back, which is, I think, what we're seeing. I'm also looking at some of the astrological signatures for the year. Pluto and Jupiter are starting. They're going to join together 3 times this year. And what's interesting to me is that all of this energy, there's a term we use astrologically called a square. So imagine a 90-degree angle. And if you've got two things, if you've got something kind of T-boning something else, it's not going to work very easily together. It can motivate things to get moving. So right now there is a dwarf planet called Eris, E-R-I-S, that is creating that conflicting pattern with Jupiter and Pluto and Saturn off and on this year. Eris is the Greek god of discord. So chaos, strife. Whenever she enters the picture, she's going to take something that is a bit uncomfortable we haven't been dealing with and force us to make a change. So that's what we're looking at right now with changes globally. The last time that we had Jupiter, Pluto, and Saturn, there was a connection. I'm looking to when they were joined together, especially Jupiter and Saturn in a very similar position, was at the time of the Black Plague in Europe in the early 1300s. Yeah. So again, we get the pandemic added into the mix. One thing I found fascinating is that the planet Saturn has just moved into Aquarius, which is an air sign. So if Saturn means restriction and Aquarius is air, so think about restricted air. I can't breathe, says George Floyd. People are wearing masks, and the COVID-19 impacts your lungs. So literally, if you watch the news, you can tell what's happening astrologically.
Wow. Yeah, that's amazing.
That has to be Ellen in the chat. I see a banner year.
That was Ellen.
That was her.
And Linda Witt says, "Holy cow." And Ellen also is the one that said you're a fabulous teacher, an amazing woman with many gifts, which I completely agree. So yes. And also hello from Thomas, Moon Eagle, Heather DeVore, Bob Macbeth, and Linda also says Mary is amazing. So you guys that are in the comments, please. Oh, and look, your baby.
We have a visitor.
We love visitors.
Hi, absolutely.
So you guys, if you have comments for Mary, we're going to talk to her a little bit here, and then I will definitely be looking at your questions if you have anything that you want to ask. We love that as well. So and tonight we were going to discuss, astrology with intuition, which it just seems that it could come to play in just every aspect of your life. It does. It just does, so. But with intuition, how, like for me, as somebody who may study a chart, all that often, I'll say often, that's probably the best word for that. How can I utilize that with my intuition?
Intuition shows up multiple ways. First of all, you can approach astrology from a couple of different vantage points. I'm a Virgo sun. And so of course I want to get into the details of it. I want to break it down into its small pieces and try to understand everything. I want to take in all that information and then put it out so that I can utilize it. But many people I have seen clients have a physical reaction to their birth chart. It's as if they respond to it even if they don't understand what all of the symbols mean. So I say that you can use a chart almost like tarot cards. Anything that is symbolic in some way will activate your subconscious and will bring out feelings, will bring out information. So trust yourself. When you're looking at your chart, literally just look at it and see what it says for you. Don't worry about being right or wrong. Now, for yourself, it's great. If you're going to read for somebody else, you want to make sure you're right.
Right.
It is astrology. There are, I've had people ask me what signs are the most intuitive. And I can honestly say every sign. So if you're born under a sign that is not typically considered intuitive, you too can be intuitive. Let me just tell you, there are so many factors to consider. If you're familiar with the birth chart, it's broken down. The Western birth chart is a wheel that's divided into 12 sections. And they're called the houses of the chart. They represent life, areas of our life experience. They can represent people in our lives. Certain houses in the chart, when they have planets that are positioned there, it tends to be easier for you to access your intuitive gifts. But intuition comes in all forms. I've seen people that have a lot of water in their chart, and water would be if you have the signs of Cancer or Scorpio or Pisces. If you have those that are strong in your chart, guaranteed you're going to be intuition. You follow your gut. You trust your senses. I've seen people with a lot of earth in their chart that will say, "Oh, I'm not psychic. I just have good instincts." And it's like, well, that's true. They don't realize what they're necessary. It's like they're picking up the energies literally from the earth itself and moving through. A lot of fire signs, Aries and Leo and Sagittarius, are also, gifted with information. It's like insight that comes through. And the air signs of Gemini and Libra and Aquarius, I swear sometimes it's almost like they just pick up passing thoughts. It's like they get a download. Mm-hmm. I have seen people's charts where they will tell me that they're not psychic at all. They're not intuitive. And I'm looking at the chart thinking, well, yes, you are. We're just waiting for it. And sometimes what will often happen, is that slower moving planets in the sky or an eclipse or something, planets that come together, they will literally hit a point in a person's chart and you will have this latent ability activated. It's like a door opens and they're like, where did that come from? You know what it's like? It's always been there. It's just waiting for you to access it.
So the Saturn return is, Molly, go ahead and ask your question. I was going to comment on the age that Saturn returned, but I see you have a question. You go ahead.
No, I was just going to ask, when we are talking about intuition, obviously everybody has the ability to be intuitive. Does it seem to be certain planets that tend to heighten intuition based on how they're moving?
Yeah, absolutely. The outer planets specifically. If your sun or the moon in your chart or Mercury, which is again how you communicate, if they are positioned very close to what we call the outer planets, outer meaning we can't see them without a telescope, and so they tend to influence the collective. Mm-hmm. If those planets are connected with your personal planets, especially the sun, the moon, or Mercury, almost always there are unique gifts that will come through. Sometimes they will show up as artistic talent, sometimes intuition. If you've got some of the planets, like those of you who have like Pluto near the ascendant is simply a part of the chart that shows where the sun was rising that day that you were at the moment of your birth. So that it's like not the sun, but it's like where the sun would have risen. It's the sign of the zodiac on the eastern horizon at the moment of your birth. This is like a Mercury retrograde moment. It is so that whatever the ascendant is, it's considered the doorway to your chart. So if you have Pluto there, or if you have Neptune there specifically, almost always strong psychic gifts. Sometimes Pluto and Jupiter can bring prophecy. You can get clairvoyance, clairaudience, clairsentience. And again, you talked about, you referenced the Saturn return. Sometimes what I'll see is that it's almost like people aren't ready for their gifts. Some people, especially those that are very sensitive, are easily overwhelmed. And it's like they need a little bit of time to kind of like proof, like when you're getting bread, dough ready to bake into bread, you want to let it rise a bit. It has to fully form before it's ready to bake and become itself. So people, I think, are like that. It's like you have to kind of work on, how am I functioning in the world? How do I deal with relationships? Do I want to go to school? But typically people that are sensitive, they know they are. They may not know what to do with it. It scares some people to death. They'll have these gifts and they'll think it's something from outside of them. And it's like 99% of the time, it's something from inside of them. So it's learning how to access it, use it, and welcome the gifts that we have. A Saturn return is a very important, it's almost like an initiation. The Saturn return is that period of your life. You spend the first 28 to 30 years pretty much doing what society wants you to do. Your parents tell you to do this, your teachers tell you to do that. You have to obey certain rules and laws to get by. Well, you don't have to, it just makes things a little simpler. But at the moment of your Saturn return, when the planet Saturn returns to where it was when you were born, it's a reset. And it's an opportunity for you to say, now free will is fully operational. And everything that you do now, you're doing from an adult perspective, and it's your choice. So you literally are sowing what you will reap later in the cycle. And sometimes part of that is accepting or stepping up and taking responsibility for the gifts that you've been given. Like maybe you weren't quite ready, but now it's like Saturn rules time. So it's time. It's time to step up, do your work, accept your gifts. Does that help?
Yes, absolutely. And that was about, the age of 30 when my gifts were, I was very aware of them. Mm. So that's why I mentioned the Saturn return with intuition. So yeah.
It's only one piece of the puzzle.
Yeah.
Yeah. There are several things. Our charts are, they're simple and complex at the same time. There are multiple layers and different ways of looking at them and utilizing them. With astrology, one of the types of astrology that I love more than anything, because there are different types of astrology. So for those that think it's only about, understanding your sun sign, I tell people, well, first of all, you have a moon sign and a Venus sign and a Mars sign, and there's a sign for everything, and they're all located in different relationships to one another. That's natal astrology. That's personal. But there's also astrology that you can do for helping. It's called electional astrology. You help people choose a time to start a business, to have an elective surgery, to get married, something where you want the best energies possible aligning with their intent. There's what we call mundane astrology, which is what I was referencing earlier when we talk about world affairs. We talk about politics or global events. It's kind of looking at it through a much larger lens, if you will. One of my favorite types of astrology is called horary astrology. It literally means of the hour. And it's a traditional ancient astrological technique that it means that if something is very important to you, the moment you ask the question, the chart cast for that moment will hold the answer to your question. And so people will call me and say, I can't find my keys. And if I pull up a chart for the moment that they ask the question, it will many times give me a direction as to, first of all, will they find their keys or are they in the garbage? Maybe they're lost forever. But sometimes it's very simple to say, what's on the eastern side of your house? And they'll say their garage, and I'll say they're still in your car. Go look, or you've dropped them on the ground. Or they're upstairs, medium height on a wall near something dark. And and people think it's magic. They think it's like intuition. And it's like, well, really, it's the symbolism of the heavens linking you to that moment in time, fully supporting you in everything that you do.
That's kind of astounding.
It's fun.
I know.
You may need a
I'm going
hotline.
to remember that. Yeah, yeah, for sure.
Especially with Mercury retrograde.
Exactly. A tech support hotline. Yeah.
Molly's our tech support hotline for this.
Thank goodness.
It's mostly just luck. I'll be honest. That's funny. So we mentioned the Saturn return. What other, beyond the Saturn return, what other astrological milestones do people, have to look forward to in their chart? Or is there anything significant?
There's something significant all the time. I mean, let's think about the one that everyone is most familiar with. The astrological milestone is your birthday. So
Right.
You've got when the sun in the sky returns to the same place it was when you were born. It's around your birthday. And it's like we follow the new moons, the full moons. The planet Mars has about a 2-year cycle. And you see the first time Mars goes through a person's chart after they're born and hits where it was when they're born, the terrible twos. Suddenly a child says, no, and mine. It's like they're using their Mars. They're figuring it out.
Mm-hmm.
Jupiter has a 12-year cycle. And so if you think of what happens to you right around the age of 12, it's like that start of puberty, and you're starting to kind of get away from home and more with your peers, starting to open up a bit. The next time it rolls around will be about the age of 24. So as a young adult, you may be out of school, you may be working again, sort of establishing some freedom, spreading your wings a little bit. That again is that 12-year cycle is very important. The planet Saturn, not just the Saturn return, but every 7 years or so, when it either, let me use the analogy of a moon phase. When we have a new moon, the sun and the moon are together in the same spot. So we don't see the moon. But then 7 days later, we see a half of a moon. It's the first quarter of the phase. 7 or so days later, it's the second quarter phase, which is a full moon. They're opposite one another. 7 or so days later, we have the third quarter phase, and 7 or so days later, we're back to a new moon. So imagine Saturn has a very similar cycle, except instead of using days, we're using years. So every 7 years or so, there's going to be a turning point. The age of 7 in a child's life becoming the age of reason. And the age of 14, again, kind of really starting to individuate and push back a bit. The age of 21, when many people consider you to be an adult, at least we like to think so. Although I'm beginning to find out that it really doesn't happen till about 28. The planet Uranus has an 84-year cycle. And so for the planet Uranus, it's every 7 years, the planet Uranus will change signs. And you can watch Uranus move through your birth chart and wake you up. It will open you up to something new. It may be unexpected. It may be sometimes shocking, but it's always going to break you out of a rut in some way. So think about the 7-year itch. Every 21 years, Uranus is going to make its square. So at the age of 42, give or take a year, depending upon how quickly things are moving, think about what happens to people at about age 42, the classic midlife crisis. The planet Uranus, which has a lot to do with your uniqueness as an individual, freedom and independence being very important to you. And now it's like a full moon. It's exactly opposite where it was when you were born. And people reevaluate. They look at their lives and they say, wait, am I happy? Am I happy in my relationship? Is this a good career path for me? Do I want to live here anymore? maybe I really should be a beach bum or something. You know, it's like people will sometimes make dramatic moves. Not everyone, because some people are on their path and they're going to follow that. There are what we call nodal returns. There are 2 points in space that are called the nodes of the moon. That's Nodes. And they represent points in space that, as an astrologer, I use these points in your birth chart to represent your soul's path in this lifetime. So no small cookies here. I mean, these are very important points. Every 18.6 years, so almost 19 years, they will return to where they were when you were born. Many people will say they will have things happen in their lives in about 19-year intervals, and they will almost always sync up with the nodes of the moon. In fact, this is a little off topic, but just recently in May, the nodes of the moon in the sky right now have changed signs. They've switched from the signs of Cancer and Capricorn, and the nodes moved backwards. So they moved into Gemini and Sagittarius. That's always a shift in the collective mindset. It's a shift in our mood. And it tells us that for about the next year and a half, we're going to be much more interested in neighborhoods. We're going to be interested in kind of having a brother-sister relationship. We're going to be gathering information and speaking our truth. So that's just kind of a little tidbit there as well. If you have one of the slower moving planets line up with something in your chart, it may be only true for you. It may not hit anyone else in your age group. But if it hits an important point of your chart, it will be a year that you remember definitively. Because when you get something like Pluto in the sky today, the last couple of years have been kind of rough on Capricorns. Let's just say there's been a lot going on with Capricorn. So that's going to impact people that are have a lot of Aries in their chart, Cancer in their chart, Libra in their chart, or Capricorn. And it means that this is their opportunity to change. Shake loose what isn't working and get ready. Have the courage to try something new.
Ooh, how interesting on the nodes.
That's
like
fascinating.
They're fun.
And
Yeah.
the ages, I know, and the ages that things hit fascinate me because I'm going, am I there? Am I over here reevaluating everything? And how you talked about May and the relationship thing. I was like, I feel like I've gone through this on the past couple of retreats I've done, that these things have come up. I'm like, here we are, snaps for Mary. Molly, do you have other questions over there that you would like to ask?
Oh goodness, yeah, I had a couple of things. So, I am an astrological newbie. It's something that has over the past year or so really begun to draw more and more of my awareness and attention, and something that I really want to dive into. So, 2 questions that I have. One is, what is one of the greatest misconceptions that you find yourself having to consistently dispel as it relates to astrology and in this kind of work, chart reading, etc.? And then I'm very curious about good resources to start for people that want to do a deep dive.
There is a ton of good astrological resources. And now that we have, the internet, I'm going to say it's a mixed bag. There are some really good people that put things out online. And then there's a lot of things that are like, well, be careful when you read it. So, I can recommend some books, for those of you who still, you can see behind me, I like books. So that's the language that I speak. In terms of misconceptions with astrology, I think a lot of people, first of all, assume that it's very one-dimensional. Once you know your sun sign, that's it. And that every Leo is like every other Leo, which could not be further from the truth. It is, everyone is unique. And I will have people tell me that they're nothing like their sun sign at all. And when I look at their chart, it's often because their sun is maybe the only thing in the chart in a particular sign, but there's a heavy concentration somewhere else. People also get afraid. They believe that their free will is taken from them. It's written in stone. My life is fated. There's nothing I can do. I just have to put one foot in front of the other. And it's like, if you act like a sheep, it's really easy to read your chart. I can guarantee you, because there are certain default things that people are just going to sort of stumble into, and you can just read it very easily. But when people wake up, when they become conscious, and when they try to really become self-aware and take charge of their lives, make their own decisions, they utilize the energy so differently that I had a teacher tell me years ago when I first started studying astrology that when someone has reached enlightenment, or when you're someone who is considered of a very, very high spiritual vibration, it's almost as if you operate outside of the bounds of your birth chart. It's like it's happening, but things that show up in your birth chart, you see reflected in people around you. It doesn't seem to impact you as much. Did that answer your question? Did that address that?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
There are, as far
Thank
as
you.
astrology books, some that are, like I said, go online. There are a lot of good astrologers online. Go to astro.com. Go to Cafe Astrology. For those of you who have apps on your phone, there's an astrological app called Time Passages that is, it's very affordable. You can get it on your phone, and it will actually teach you a lot about astrology. The Bob Marks is an astrologer. There, any of the well-known astrologers like Stephen Forrest or Robert Hand, any books by somebody who's been doing this for a while, I would highly recommend. But it's important to me, before somebody really dives in, like you said, a deep dive, it's kind of, I would like to talk to you about what type of astrology you're wanting to dive into, because again, there's an entire spectrum. If you just want the basics of understanding the planets, the signs, the houses, how the building blocks of astrology are put together, there's a series that I recommend. It's sort of old-fashioned, but it's by two women, Marion March and Joan McEvers. So March and McEvers, and they did a series of books called The Only Way to Learn Astrology. And it's like, it's a cookbook. It literally will walk you through and introduce you to the ABCs of astrology. For those of you more spiritually inclined, there's a writer called Isabel Hickey who wrote Astrology, the Cosmic Science. Again, there's Stephen Forrest. Many people love his work. He is what's called an evolutionary astrologer, has a very different take on astrology than many other people that you will read. And anyone who's listening tonight can also feel free to contact me. I'd be happy to share a book. So we need to talk so that I can make sure you get the information that you need.
Awesome.
I think that's perfect.
Thank
Mary,
you.
what is your website? And we'll announce it at the end. Do you have a website or a place that they can email you or reach out to you?
Yeah, absolutely. Can I share my screen? Is that possible?
I think so.
See if I
Maybe.
can.
So I think there's a button.
I'm going to see if I can. Let's see if this
Practice with
happens.
it. It says you're ready to share.
Okay, let's see what pops up here. I want an application window. This is what I want to share. So this is my website, www.marykeswani.com. Can you see that?
1 second. Almost. I think I just have to allow it. 1 second. I'm working now on it. I have to accept it, but I'm on the struggle bus. 1 sec. Here we go. Jess is on it, y'all.
Do I need to stop sharing, Jess?
Nope, there it is.
Okay.
I've got it on there.
My email is my name, marykeswani@gmail.com. Or you could go to my website, www.marykeswani.com, for information about the type of work that I do. And it will tell you the types of readings that are available. I always post my letters I send a letter out to my list 4 times a year for the equinoxes and solstices. And it kind of gives you a heads up about what's happening in the sky. And that will go out this week as well. So if you'd like to be included on that, send me an email and I'd be happy to put you on there.
Perfect timing for
Awesome.
that. Molly, do you have, I know we have a couple comments I'm excited to share, but I want to make sure, do you have any other questions you'd like to ask before I make the comments?
I think that's all of the questions that I had on my list. I assume that there's probably some folks watching that definitely have some things they're interested in learning more about. So let's see what they have.
Okay, well, let's see. So Thomas Mooningle says, 8 years ago, we started the 2-year program. Do you remember that, Mary?
Yes, I do. Very well.
Sunny said, Mary is absolutely amazing. I had a reading a few weeks ago and I'm still digesting all the information she had to share. And I will tell you the same. I was just thinking, I need to look back at what we went over because I bet there are things
I would too.
Yes. And Ellen, she asked, where do we find where Eris is in our chart? Did I pronounce that right, Eris?
Eris is fine. There's actually an online ephemeris for Eris, so you could look up online ephemeris. It is so slow moving. This is a planet. It's a dwarf planet that has about a 500-year orbit. So almost everyone alive today will have Eris in the sign of Aries. Guaranteed. If you're alive today. So if you're looking up a historical figure, it might be somewhere else. But right now it is at about 22 or 24 degrees of Aries. But there is an online ephemeris. It's not yet available in the astrology calendars that we typically get. Maynard was going to put it in his, but Jim Maynard, who published the Celestial Guides, is retiring. So they have not yet put Eris position in Llewellyn, as far as I know.
Okay. Yeah, that was a new one for me. Like I hadn't heard of that one before. Couple of other comment of praise for sure here. Barbara says that Mary is a gifted teacher and astrologer and a really decent human being. And Ellen almost added that to my comment. I'll just have to give you that. Like, yes, legit. And then Jen Coyle says, she said we're her 3 favorite people, so that's exciting. And she sees you for annual readings, and she's all spot on. Okay, and then another question: is there an asteroid Hadal, Hadol? Have you heard of that asteroid?
Does it say asteroid? There are tons of asteroids. I mean, like 10,000. And there are a lot of named asteroids, and that can be an entire separate study of itself. You can actually put so many items in a birth chart that it is no longer readable because there's almost too much detail. But so that particular one, no, I am not familiar with.
Okay. Well, this is wonderful. If you all have any other questions, please comment below. But I want to say that I've really enjoyed this. There's so much to astrology that I personally have not taken that deep dive into. I do a lot and focus around the moon energies. I'm so fascinated by the stars and the sky and just looking up at everything. And Thomas wanted to ask about Chiron. It was just Chiron question mark. So loaded question.
Yeah. That really is a loaded question, Thomas. Chiron, almost every planetary body, it's very curious to me. They're named by an astronomical organization. But the names, if you go back to the mythology of the name, they will almost always tell you a lot about the characteristics of that item that you're looking at. Chiron is known as the wounded healer. It's literally the shaman. Its glyph looks sort of like an old-fashioned key, if you will. And it literally is a key to your chart that when you can work through a wound that sometimes you've carried with you, even unconsciously, for lifetimes, When you finally find the key to that, it allows you then to use that energy to heal other people. Very potent. Chiron has a 49 to 51 year orbit. So, Jessica, when you said, what's one of the big markers here? Right around the ages of 49 to 51 is your Chiron return. And it's like, boy, if you haven't worked through any of your old patterning, habits from the past, Chiron is going to activate that, and it's going to remind you of an area that's going to need your attention. It can be very powerful in a chart. And when it's strongly configured, it will show up in the charts of people that do shamanic work or healing work.
And Ellen mentioned that it's very active right now, the wounded healer.
Very much so. It's in the sign of,
and then
it's also in Aries.
Sorry, I didn't mean to overlap. So if your Chiron is the same as your ascendant, what does that mean?
It would depend on, literally, that's like hard to pull out of context. But first thing I can say about Chiron, if it's the same sign as your ascendant or sitting on your ascendant, that can make a difference. But the ascendant as the doorway to your chart is what you are physically projecting. It's kind of what you greet the world with. So with Chiron, it's like literally like wearing your heart on your sleeve, wearing your wound right up front. It means you will deal with this sooner rather than later. So it's something that will show up very early in your life. It'd be a theme for you, basically.
And that has come up a lot for me lately. I know. Molly, yes. And Jen asks, are you going to be teaching this year?
I am. I'm going to start a series of beginning classes later in July. I'm actually trying to put them in between the retrogrades, trying to fit them in. And they will be by Zoom. So it'll be an online forum since none of us are meeting in person right now. And I'm also hoping to do one for the more intermediate people who've studied a little bit, because it's very important to learn how to not only read astrology in your chart, but also in the news. So talking more about current events and what's happening in the news. When you pick up the newspaper and you see it, like I said, you can read it in the sky. The symbolism is already present. So it will help you become a little bit more secure. It's like you can kind of anticipate what's happening. You ride the waves, if you will.
I'm interested in
something that I do want to mention.
Yeah, me too.
Go ahead,
I will
Mary.
make sure you get that info. Something that I wanted people to be aware of is that, I referenced Mars very briefly. Mars is the planet whose symbol looks like the symbol for male. It's the circle with the arrow shooting out of it. And it has to do with how you handle anger and how you assert yourself. It's your energy level. It's that masculine energy within you, whether you're male, female, binary, it doesn't matter. It's that energy that is coming through. On the 28th of this month, Mars, will move into the sign of Aries. On a typical month, Mars will stay in Aries for about 8 weeks, 6 to 8 weeks. Mars is going to go into Aries at the end of June and not leave Aries until January the 6th. So it will be there for the whole second half of the year. It will be retrograde from September 9th through November the 13th. So we've talked Mercury retrograde, Venus retrograde, Mars retrograde. And because it's going to be in its own sign of Aries, it's going to be making that stressful aspect that we talked about to all the planets that are in Capricorn. That will impact the presidential election this year. There's a lot of really stressful energy right around early November. That's going to be a huge turning point for us. This cat that keeps showing up is a Leo. Can I just point that out? She wants to be on camera.
She's trying to be with her other Leo.
That's it.
We Leos can't help ourselves. we have banner year on here, and right in the middle of election time. So you've got some people who know astrology here, and I'm so grateful for that. And I know you've got some newbies on here, so we're going to look for you at marykeswani.com. Your email is marykeswani@gmail.com. And we'd
Correct.
love to have you back.
Absolutely.
We would love to have you back. I feel like there's so much to talk about, right, Molly?
Absolutely. Yeah, that would be amazing. We'd love it.
There is always a lot to talk about. This just seems to be an extraordinary year.
Yeah, it really does. It reminds me, we did our episode last week was focusing on self-care. I think we might need to go back in the archives and look at some of that, especially as we move forward throughout the end of the year. It sounds like some really tumultuous stuff coming our way.
2020 is going to be about doing your work. Anywhere that you can be disciplined, not isolated, not hiding, but just show up and do your work, and know that everything's going to take longer than you expect it to this year. So a little patience will go a long way. Thank you both for letting me share tonight. I really appreciate it.
Oh, goodness. Thank you so much for being here. This has been wonderful. Absolutely.
Thank you so much. All right. We will see you all tomorrow
night. We're back with Dave Vickers.
Yes.
Earlier time tomorrow, since Dave is joining us from the UK, but we're going to be talking about learning to trust tomorrow night. So you get a twofer this week.
Yay.
Perfect.
All right. You all have a good night. Thank you, Mary.
Bye. Thank you so much, Mary. Have a great night.